All right.
Prophets, what else is in this parsha?
War, priests, environment. This is a good one. Maybe some shoftim. Yeah, we don't know anything about judges. Yeah. Okay. Shabbat shalom and good morning. So if you have your Chumash, we're actually going to start in Exodus, if that's okay. We're going to take a little journey today, and we're going to look at, you may have seen in the news, there's different things about judges. There's obviously the question, there obviously is the question in Israel about the judiciary. And there might be questions that you may have read about Supreme Court judges that may have received certain gifts. There you go. That's a good way to put it. Gifts, right? And guess what our Parsha deals with? Yeah, guess what our Parsha deals with? So we're going to take a look at the judiciary for a little bit, according to the Torah, and then do some additional studying. So if you have the Chumash, we're going to go to Exodus chapter 23. Starting verse 3. This is Parshat Mishpatim. If you know anything about Parshat Mishpatim, this immediately follows the 10 Commandments, and these are the explanation or expansion. Post 10 Commandments at Mount Sinai, the expansion of additional mitzvot, additional laws. And Parshat Mishpatim is really like a miscellany. There are about 60 different commandments that are added in addition to the 10 commandments given at Mount Sinai that have different levels of importance. So we're going to be on page 472. 472. So if someone wants to read, well, I got those online can't hear me. Can't hear unless I do it. So sorry, I'm going to just read because the ceiling mics aren't working. We're starting verse 6. And let me just sort of back up for a second. I give a little bit of introduction. As Ron, when I walked in, Ron turned to me and said, are we going to get past the fourth verse in our Parsha, which is one of the most famous verses in the entire Torah? Justice, justice shall you pursue. Tzedek, tzedek tirdof. Very important line. It's a guidepost for us. In fact, if you take a look, I'm not sure how much you've studied the Eitz Chaim Chumash, but there are short essays in the back about various subjects. There's not a lot. There's about 30 essays. And there's an entire essay written by Rabbi Elliot Dorff on justice. And of course, he opens with the line from our Torah portion, Parshat Shoftim, Tzedek, tzedek tirdof, justice, justice shall you pursue. So obviously justice is a hallmark for being Jewish, and it's the hallmark of our Parsha. So if I can just start, I listen to a number of weekly podcasts. One of them is a podcast on the Parsha, and it is from Pardes.
Yeah, okay.
I listen to the Pardes from Jerusalem. Has anyone here ever studied at Pardes in Jerusalem? Oh, I recommend it. I recommend it. I never actually studied there directly, but when I did my year in rabbinical school, we did many like joint programs at Pardes, and many of their teachers are excellent. So they have a weekly podcast. It's about a 20-minute podcast on the Parsha. And one of the presenters in the podcast this week actually shared a story as a frame for the Parsha. And this is how she framed that. I'm sorry, I don't remember her name. It's called Looking Beyond Our Own Reflection. And she told the story that oftentimes when we park our car and we're walking, in a parking lot, or walking to a store, or if you live in an apartment building and there's a parking lot, you walk in, what are you usually looking at? You're looking at your phone. You're sort of thinking to yourself, or maybe you look at the reflection on the car windows, but you look at how you look yourself. Is my hair, how does my hair look? Is my jacket laying right? right? That's what we look at, right? But do we actually look inside the car at who's in there? Do they need our help? Do we say hello? So this is the story that she shared, that too often we look at our own reflections to see how we look ourselves. It happened in Israel this past week that there's a man who lived in a small town, and every time he parks his car, he actually has a habit. He lives in an apartment building and they park on the street. He has a habit to actually go up and down every single row of the parking lot of the apartment building to make sure that there's no child that was left in the car, especially in the heat of the summer, right? You've heard those awful stories, right? So it so happened that this week, that man who had a habit of not looking at his own reflection, but actually looking in the car to make sure that everyone was okay, saw that there was a sleeping child in a car. And in fact, of course, he immediately rushed to work. What he actually noticed was it was actually his own child, who his neighbor had picked up from camp, among other people, including his siblings and their own kids. And it must have happened that everyone rushed out of the car, but didn't realize that one of them was asleep in the rush and the tumult of running in. So luckily he could identify the car, his neighbor's car, because he knew the neighbor was picking up his kid, and were able to open the door, get the keys quickly, open the door, and save his son. So this is what was said, right? This young father saved his own child. By the way, he's a volunteer EMT. Right. And what he sort of learned from it was that we should never be off duty. We should never just look at our own reflections, but we have to look inside and see what other people need. And the frame for the Parsha, as we've already sort of alluded to, is what types of leaders we should establish for the Jewish people, for Israel, and what type of leaders we can be ourselves. And our Parshat Shoftim means judges, actually presents three different types of leaders across this Parsha. This is actually a very sort of complete, it's sort of a Parsha that can actually stand on its own because it presents the three types of leaders. If you know, there's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, which says that there are three crowns that you can wear: the crown of Torah, the crown of priesthood, and the crown of royalty, if you've heard that before. Keter Malchut, Keter Kehuna, and Keter Torah, right? There's three different crowns that you can wear, and that actually also follows the frame of this, that there are three leadership levels, perhaps like the separation of powers that we have, the checks and the balance. There are judges, there are priests, and there is a king. And oftentimes when we study this Parsha, we study the laws of a king. And if we have time, we're actually going to look at them because it's very interesting the way that the Torah presents what a Jewish king and the Israelite king can do and can't do. So having said that, there are three pillars of leadership, and the first is the judiciary. So now we're going to look at what the Torah actually says judges can and cannot do. So we're actually going back to Exodus 23, verse 6. And this is how this opens. This is again at Mount Sinai. After the Ten Commandments, this is one of the laws presented. You shall not subvert the rights of your needy in their disputes. Keep far from a false charge. Do not bring death on those who are innocent and in the right, for I will not acquit the wrongdoer. Do not take bribes, for bribes blind the clear-sighted and upset the pleas of those who are right, in the right. You shall not oppress a stranger, for you know the feelings of the stranger, having yourselves been strangers in the land of Egypt. So what do we take from these couple of verses? What should a judge do? Do we have any principle here of how a judge should judge in a courtroom? A judge should judge justly. Great. By the way, is that word here in the Hebrew? If you're a Hebrew speaker and you look, if you look at the second line, the fourth word, vitzadik, right? Tzedek, 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 tirdof, vitzadik. right? That it doesn't exactly translate here, but right, this is right, that you should be just. Anything else? Well, we saw the thing, don't take bribes, right? Keep fall from a false charge. Don't subvert the rights of the needy. Mm-hmm. 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 If for those online, you can't hear Sheila, but what she's saying is she's focusing on one of the last phrases, upset the pleas of those who are in the right. This is justice, right? Be mindful of both sides. Does that mean keep an open eye? Don't make any don't make any rash decisions. Okay, let's go to the second place in the Torah where we learn about judges, which is Leviticus 19:15. Which begins on page 696. This is from the section known as the Holiness Code, another really important section in the Torah. This is where we have the very famous phrase, V'ahavta l'recha kamocha, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Do not place a stumbling block before the blind. That's actually the verse that precedes the verses that we're going to look at, which teach us what judges should do. So it's Leviticus chapter 19, verse 15, page 696. Yeah, you shall not render an unfair decision. Right there, mishpat is decision. Do not favor the poor, nor show deference to the rich. Judge your kinsman fairly. Do not deal basely with your countrymen. Do not profit by the blood of your fellow. I am the Lord. What does that teach us? Right? Doesn't matter who's appearing before you, whether it's a rich person or a poor person, right? Look at every individual as in their own right. Anything else we learned from this? Yeah, by the way, one of the things that as a synagogue we're involved in through Greater Cleveland congregations is working on justice work, that everyone in our county and everyone in our region should have fair justice. And that's a number of the projects that we work with. In particular, we're working on something called Youth Bindover, where 14 and 15-year-olds who are not convicted, convicted that they're treated as adults. And these are 14 and 15-year-olds. And actually, Cuyahoga County has 4 times the number of youth bindovers in the entire state of Ohio. And a 14 or 15-year-old who is sentenced as an adult, their lives are never off. Their suicide rates are extremely high. And also just they never get their life back together, and it destroys their families. So that's one of the justice things that we're doing as a synagogue that we're involved in. You can hear a lot more about it later. Anything else from these couple sentences, these couple verses? Yeah. Yeah. Can you be influenced by the rich? Mm-hmm. Right. So this is that question of, right, what influence you might not show deference to them, but what influence do they have? Yeah, Mike?
Yeah, here. The previous one, it was the stranger.
Yeah. Right. So Mike's recognizing there's both sort of in the Exodus passage, it was about, right, take care of the stranger. And here it's talking about take care of your countrymen and your kinsmen is right. I stopped before that, right? Yeah, so it is interesting. The importance is for both. We, the rabbis say, and we're going to look at we're going to get to our parsha in a second. Like I'm sure you've heard this before. The Torah never repeats itself, or if the Torah repeats itself, we have to learn something new, right? The repetition teaches us something different. So each of these, the Exodus and the Leviticus, teach us a little bit differently about how to judge. So one is how to judge a stranger, and this is how to judge someone within your own community or in your own family. So now we're going to jump to our parsha.
Rabbi?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, Nelson and then Linda here. Yeah, Nelson?
Well, the thing is about your kin is sometimes you really don't like them. And you know them, and maybe that's really the point, is that if you already know somebody, judge them fairly. Don't judge them by what your previous experience.
100. Yeah, I like that. Thank you. 100%. Yeah, Linda? Hmm.
And for some reason, I treated him well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Dressed in a suit, turns out he had a chain of restaurants. He said, come to my office for something.
Wow.
So he just.
Yeah. So those online, sir, there's a tech issue. You can't hear you can only hear me. So I'm going to really paraphrase a beautiful story that Linda said, but she actually had it occur where she was working a food show, a trade show, and someone appeared dressed really shabbily, right? And she was respectful and welcoming and kind to him. And it turned out he came the next day dressed really well, and he was a top level businessman. Yeah. So. Yeah, all these, right. These are regular. And actually, if you know Elijah stories, that's that's the common theme in our tradition. So now we're going to get to our parsha. So if we go to Parshat Shoftim, we're going to jump to Deuteronomy. Actually, we're going to look at one more thing. Sorry. The opening of Deuteronomy, already opening in Deuteronomy in chapter 1. We'll get the page, but it's 1 verse 13. Ron says 985. 984. By the way, Rabbi Sachs, when he writes about justice, he says that the book in our book, Sefer Devarim, the word justice appears the most time, 18 times. Of course, there's significance to the number 18, right? 18 times in Devarim does justice appear. By the way, Genesis is second in Bereshit, 16 times. All the middle books is only a few times. It's interesting that the Torah opens with justice and closes with justice. This is the frame for the creation of the world and our who we are as a country. Deuteronomy is really about Moses' final words of what he instills, the most important values as the people enter the land. So starting with Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 13 through 18. Okay. Pick from each of your tribes men who are wise, discerning, and experienced, and I will appoint them as your heads. You answered me and said, what you propose to do is good. So I took your tribal leaders, wise and experienced men, appointed them over you chiefs. By the way, chiefs here is the same word as judges. Judges of thousands, judges of hundreds, judges of 50s, judges of 10s, and officials for your tribes. I charge your magistrates at that time as follows: hear out your fellow men, decide justly between any man and a fellow Israelite or a stranger. You now shall not be partial in judgment, hear out low and high alike. Fear no man, for judgment is God's. And any matter that is too difficult for you, you shall bring to me and I will hear it. Thus I instructed you at that time about the various things you should do. So this is Jackie wants to say, right? This is Deuteronomy's sort of final thing about how to appoint judges. Yeah, Jackie? Yes. Yeah, right. Good. We're going to get there. Yeah. So what Jackie is saying, so, okay, we now have a third time of judges, and then we're actually in our part, is the fourth time. Right. So the question, why is there such repetition about what judges are and how they should be impartial and treat everyone the same, and whether you're part of the family, part of the community, not part of the community, right? And the repetition shows there's a couple of reasons why, potential reasons why. Reason number one is they're saying it over and over again because it wasn't happening. The reality on the ground for the Jewish people at that time, or maybe, if we understand that the Torah is eternal, right? That God knew that we would need to hear this today in 2023, right? Is that, right? Judges are not practicing appropriately and following these things. So we need to hear it over and over again until we actually finally listen and follow it. Yeah.
What criteria might be used? As people get older, they begin to say, "Oh, mommy told me that when I was a kid, how right she was."
Right. So now you're right. So now what Elliot is asking is, right, what are the three qualities established here in Deuteronomy of how a judge is chosen? Right. And he's asking, what is the wisdom? What type of wisdom are we talking about? Right. Right. So here it says wisdom, discernment, and experience. If you were going to pick a judge, if you were going to confirm a judge, right, what would be the qualities that you're looking for? Is this it? Wisdom, understanding or discernment, and experience? Or would you want a little something else? Yeah.
Different people may interpret their experience differently depending on.
Yeah.
And there are people with limited experience who can rise to high roles because somehow they know how to handle those.
Yeah.
So in a resume, how much does experience count?
If those online can't hear it, Elliot's questioning what experience is required and how much experience. What would you add another quality? Impartiality. Anything else? To be courageous, have some inner courage, inner strength, not to be intimidated.
Rabbi, how do these differ from discernment?
I'm sorry, say that again, Nelson.
How do these differ from discernment?
Well, it's a vague, yeah, right. It's a vague term, in my opinion. Discernment. What did Solomon ask for? Wisdom, right? Correct. An understanding heart, or the same word, by the way, right? It's binah is the root of that word, which is understanding or discernment. Yeah. Well, let's look at now our parsha and see if we can add a couple more qualities that we want to look for a judge. Okay, so now we're Deuteronomy chapter 16. It's on page 1088. Yes.
There's no mention of God. Like, those people, what about being God-fearing?
No mention about God and being God-fearing. Yeah. Yeah. Right? Correct? Is that just assumed?
Thing is, you keep reading it, it will come through that.
Right. Bijan is saying that comes through already. It's understood. Yeah. Right. God is talking through Moses to their own people. Yeah. Well, let's read this one and then see if it comes through. Yeah.
This conversation reminds me of Chabad acronym, Chaf, Medina, Badash.
Yep.
Are these not related?
It's definitely related, right? Chabad itself is a acronym of the highest values. Actually, it's the Sfirot, right? Of wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, right? So, right, that's which is the highest levels of intellect. Yeah. Which we, by the way, we say is God's highest level of intellect because we're emulating God. So let's look at the opening of Shoftim. You shall appoint magistrates and officials for your tribes and all the settlements that the Lord your God is giving you. They shall govern the people with due justice. That word is mishpat tzedek. By the way, mishpat and tzedek are sort of contradictory and also harmonious words, which we can talk about on the side. You shall not judge unfairly. You shall not show partiality. You shall not take bribes, for bribes blind the eyes of the discerning and upset the plea of the just. Does this sound familiar? Almost, by the way, I think every single phrase we saw in one of those first 3 times earlier in the Torah, in the Exodus, Leviticus, or earlier Deuteronomy. So again, these are repeats. And then it ends with this: justice, justice shall you pursue, that you may thrive and occupy the land that the Lord your God is giving you. Who is the verse talking to? Justice, justice shall you pursue. All right, well, so Bijan said judges. Helena said every one of us. You agree with, we have some agreements for Helena, right? So, right, if the paragraph itself, and if you actually look here, if you look in the Hebrew on the top of 1089, do you see after the end of that verse, there's a little samach? Do you know what the samach means? That actually means end of paragraph. And in the Torah, the way the Torah is written, that is the end of a paragraph. Yeah. By the way, there's 2 differences there. If there's a pei and a samech, they're different. A pei is that there's a longer break, and a samech is a smaller break. But yeah, or maybe it's the other way around. Now I'm going to have to look in the Torah to look. But yeah, there's shorter breaks. But regardless, it signifies there's a thematic pause here. End of paragraph. So I'm just saying that to say that the line tzedek tzedek tirdof is attached directly to this previous paragraph, or this paragraph, which is talking about what judges should do. So, right, this is the question for us. Is this specifically a command which we apply? Tzedek tzedek tirdof should be everybody, right? We should all pursue justice, right? Which is what Helena and Sheila and other people were saying too. I think Larry and others, right? That this is not just a command or an imperative that judges have to follow to be just, but this is, right, every single moment and every single day, right? We have to live justly.
The question about verse 20, the justice.
Yeah.
Is it referring to the you in verse 18 or the you in verse 19? Because the 2 yous are different.
Who is the you?
The you in verse 18 is the everybody, and the you in the verse 19.
Okay, verse 18, which is you shall appoint judges over you. Right. So that's actually a command to or a request to the entire Jewish people. Right. Or maybe I'm not sure if everybody made the decision, or at least the leadership, right? Right. So, right, verse 18 seems to be a general command. Verse 19 is, now this is the charge to the judges. So maybe it makes sense, maybe as we have selected judges, we're giving them an encapsulation of all the previous laws of what a judge should do that appeared in Exodus, Leviticus, and earlier Deuteronomy. Maybe that's why the repeat is here, right? Now that you've been appointed, right? Remember, these are the things you're supposed to follow. Yeah. And by the way, as I opened, when you look at this and we think about judges today, how do they measure up? Yeah. Is this really so idealistic to say, don't take a bribe? Is it really so idealistic to say, judge people impartially? Right? Is this such a high bar? Yeah.
If verse 18 you as in everybody. Shouldn't grammatically the word, noten lacha should have been titnu lachem or mashu. Is that something similar?
And now you're getting grammatical.
I mean,
Yeah, you're getting grammatical.
doesn't fit.
Yeah. So if you look at the verse tzedek tzedek tirdof, right? It's in the singular. Justice, justice shall you pursue. And there is a way to make it plural. So the question is it singular because it's talking to a judge, or is it singular because it's the collective of the people of Israel as one, right? But in the Hebrew, it's written singularly. By the way, it's not just justice, justice shall you pursue. What is the consequence or the reward for pursuing justice?
Being filled out in the plan.
Right? Well, hopefully the positive is if you do it, right, you will thrive and live in the land of Israel that God has given you, right?
Inherit.
It's a condition. Yeah. Or potentially a reward. By the way, right, if you know that from the 10 Commandments, honor your father and your mother, right, that you shall live a long life. There's a similar thing, right? Right. There are certain very few.
Don't forget the bird.
And the bird, right? The third one is shooing away the mother bird when you take the baby bird. Yeah, there's only 3 places, I think, in the Torah, and this is one of the 3 where they're sort of given these conditions / rewards / however you want to look at it. Yeah. I see you, Lois. We'll just get Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to get Mike and then we'll get you. Yeah, Mike.
And not live in the land that God has given you, but the charged term nowadays, occupy.
Where were they? This is contextual. Where were they when God or Moses spoke to the people and said this? They were not in the, right? They didn't yet possess Canaan. They were in the desert, right? So this is one of these. Remember, Moses isn't going. Right? What is this lasting message I can give to you? Right? Like you're going to live in the desert unless. So yeah, I see what you're saying though, right? Because especially what the translation here is occupy, right? Which is not necessarily what the Hebrew means. Yeah. Right. But here it's saying, right. So occupy is a charged word now for us, right? Right. But this, I mean, I guess it's possessed. So yeah, but this was pre-conquest. Oh yeah, that's right. Thanks for the reminder, Lois.
Thanks. Yeah, and this is sort of goes back a little bit to what you were saying before, but I think it's it's active that you go out in the world and look for things that are not right and pursue justice and things that we see wrong today that we need to become involved in. And then that leads to tikkun olam, which is like you're in the land, but you're also making the world a better place.
Thank you. Beautiful. So I'm going to go back actually the podcast. If you listen to it, then they actually say something very similar to you. So I'll give you the words from the podcast. And sorry, it is the Pardes from Jerusalem this week on Shoftim. And again, I don't remember who actually said it. Judges, right? And this is about appointing judges, right? They are supposed to be knowledgeable about social and criminal law, but also, and this is what I got to in what we were saying from the last thing, there potentially is another value. It's not just that they should be knowledgeable, understanding, or have discernment, right? And wise, but there seems to be some other level about being righteous, right? This parsha here, we get the level of righteousness sort of that's added in. It's the undercurrent to the others, but it might not be stated so clearly, right? And we want a judge who will judge honestly, correctly, and compassionately, right? And this now getting to what Lois said, right? Judges should not just look at their own reflections and assume that they're always right, but look into every car, every issue, and every person so that no one has been left to suffocate. Don't look at your own reflection to confirm your own worldview, but also try to understand the worldview from the other person that's standing before you that you're judging. Yeah, Elliot?
Some of these qualities that you're mentioning Isn't there something in Pirkei Avos, this is modern day relative, that says we should attach ourselves to a Torah scholar that has some of those qualities?
Yep. Yes. 100%. Yeah.
You, Rabbi.
And many other, and that's why I attached myself to Rabbi Sachs. So yeah. 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 Sheila? It's talking about bribes. Yeah. Right. Yeah, they're bribes. Yeah, bribes. The Torah says it how many times did we see it? 3 times, I think. 3 times we saw don't take bribes, right? Again, read the news. Yeah. Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Oh. Sheila's asking, should we also just strive not to try to bribe people? Right. It's not just the judges accepting bribes.
Prevent out-of-court settlement?
Yeah, I don't know about that. So let me give you a little bit of Rabbi Sachs and then I'll get you Jackie. So Rabbi Sachs tries to translate the word tzedek, which we're saying is justice. Right. So he said it's an impossible word to translate. It means justice, charity, righteousness, integrity, equity, fairness, innocence, right? So it encapsulates all those things. It doesn't just mean legal justice alone, right? It means all these things together. And then he asks, why is justice so central to Judaism? Because it is impartial. Law, as envisioned by the Torah, makes no distinction between rich and poor, powerful and powerless, homeborn or stranger. Equity before the law is the translation into human terms of equality before God. Time and time again, the Torah insists that justice is not a human artifact, but it is an inescapable duty and an inalienable right. Judaism is a religion of love. You shall love the Lord your God. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. You shall love the stranger. But it's also a religion of justice. For without justice, love corrupts. It's also a religion of compassion. For without compassion, law itself can generate equity. So this is how he ends. Justice plus compassion equals tzedek, the first precondition of a decent society. So he sees justice being joined together with compassion to equal tzedek, righteousness. And by the way, if we read, we're not going to read it, but that short essay in the back of our Chumash by Rabbi Elliot Dorff talks about justice as the holiest venture that we can take. And that's why it appears 18 times in the book of Deuteronomy, that word, because that justice is actually the thing that God requires and wants us to do. David, I see online.
This is sort of a technical question, I guess, but when Rabbi Sachs says equity, does he mean equity in the general sense of equal treatment, et cetera, or does he mean equity in the technical sense, as in the Anglo-American legal system, where you have courts of law and courts of equity? In this country, they're combined. In Britain, they're separated, and they provide different kinds of relief. Law courts provide monetary relief, and equity courts provide injunctive relief.
I wish I could ask him for you. Yeah, I don't have that. It's a good question. And it's a short, by the way, this is a really short essay. It's actually his commentary, one of his commentaries on Parsha Devarim from the third thing that we looked at. I think it's not the specific, but the more general, but I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, Jackie, we're waiting. Sorry, if someone is technically. Jackie's saying that we should never show any favoritism, correct? I mean, obviously, like recusing yourself, right? There's a whole idea of recusing yourself in different situations. Yeah. So I'm not going to go into it, but I actually have an 18-page source sheet about what tzedek tirdof means. So just a little look at that sentence for a second. So number one, what's interesting about tzedek, and we're going to wrap up. What's interesting about that phrase and that verse? Sorry, we didn't get past it, Ron. Tzedek tirdof.
I think there's an element of repetition.
So obviously there's an element of repetition. I mean, would it have been enough to say justice you shall pursue all the days of your life? So you're making a point. So the repetition is crucial to this significant. I mean, yeah, yes, it would have been a significant statement just to say justice you shall pursue. But
Practice makes perfect.
right. Practice. Yeah. So right. The repetition gives it more weight. Yeah. Carol? The direct object comes before the verb. That is sort of classic Hebrew. So it's not just this. Hebrew, you can mix up the order, but yes, it is important to say, right? They could have said, right, you shall pursue justice. That is another way to say it in Hebrew. It's not that the way that it is here, it could go either way. Yeah, but yes, the fact that it's the Hebrew of the verse starts with justice, right? And not pursue justice, right? Could have just said, pursue justice all the days of your life. Right? But it says justice you shall pursue. Yeah. No. Yeah. Yeah. It's so I understand. Yeah. So what's being asked is it like your honor? You shall pursue justice. No, that the word tzedek here is a quality. Yeah, that would be tzaddik. A tzaddik, is the noun, is the, I don't know what's it called when it becomes a person. Yeah. A proper noun. Yeah. So it's a value or an ideal. Yeah. Tzedek is something that you do. Yeah. By the way, what's interesting about the word pursue? Right. I want to just talk about the word pursue for a second, right? Rodef is chase after or pursue, right? We use it in different contexts, right? The thing about Hillel, right? Or about Aaron, right? Aaron pursued peace, right? So, right. What does it mean that we are pursuing justice? Can you ever actually get there? Right? Is it this sort of thing on the horizon that you can get as close and close and close as you can? Yeah, it's aspirational. It's active, right? It is active, aspirational, right? So, right, it's not justice you shall do. Right? By the way, we have that. The prophet Micah gives what does the Lord require of you to be a good person? Right? To do justice, oseh mishpat, ohev chesed, to love kindness and walk humbly with your God. Right? So there it says do justice, but here it says pursue justice. I could have said do justice. It's aspirational. Yeah. Oh, look at.
I think that's what they say.
Yeah. Practicing. I like that. That's why it's called practicing law. Yes. Yeah. Nina's looking at that verse. Okay, we're going to wrap up on this. Good. Yeah, because I needed to wrap up. All right. So Nina's asking why specifically is this the second half of the phrase, right? Justice you shall pursue, right? And then you will occupy and live in the land, right? Right. because that's how we thrive as a people, or like this line from Rabbi Sachs where he concludes his thing, right? That the only way to have a decent society is to have justice plus compassion, which equals tzedek. Yeah, I guess you're going to get the closing word, Elliot. Yeah.
And there's a word you mentioned. That for those who are judging, but they are to pursue justice, if not compassionate. And to be compassionate would not be necessary to be empathetic or to have a sense of the emotions involved with the person that we are judging. Compassion, emotion, judgment.
Beautiful. So let me give you a couple of things. So again, I'm not going to go all through it. The rabbis do read into this justice you shall pursue with some actual like legal things. So one is that they say that a judge shouldn't actually render a decision immediately. They should wait a day and sleep on it. And that's the repetition of the tzedek, is that take one day and then a second day to think about it. So the rabbis read into this. They talk about the idea that God should be just is the first tzedek, and that humanity should be just is the second tzedek. Or, as we said, like who is the subject of this or the object of this? So one is that judges should be, and then the second is that the society should be. So there's all different readings. And then, of course, the last one, as we said, is just if anything is repeated in the Torah, it shows emphasis or the fact that it wasn't being followed, but it should be. So thank you for studying with me. Oh, Ron, I guess Ron gets the final word. Yeah.
There's so many multiple definitions of tzedek.
Yes.
One of them is judgment and one of them is compassion.
Yes.
So that's why it's there. Multiple.
It's the multiple meanings of tzedek itself. I like that. All right. Well, thank you for learning with me. Have a good day, everybody. Shabbat shalom.